Here is Hillary Clinton on Rachel Maddow's show. And I'll tell you what is really, really disturbing about this. Play the clip.
But remember, the Russians invaded Afghanistan back in 1980. And although no country went in, they certainly had a lot of countries supplying arms and advice and even some advisors to those who were recruited.
One second. So just for those of you who are younger and don't know the history, when she says a lot of countries, really, basically, it's the United States. I mean, it may be our allies. They're doing it at our behest and et cetera, but we armed the Mujahideen. We actually paid for the madrasas in Pakistan to develop the Taliban.
Isn't there a movie starring Tom Hanks about this?
Yes, Charlie Wilson's War.
Brave Mujahideen fighters.
And also, you know, this is how bin Laden grows.
Yes.
And
so I mean, her use of the passive voice is doing a lot there.
Exactly. Exactly. But her point being that it severely damaged the Soviet Union. So just keep that in mind. This is the mode of thought that is going on here, that sucking them into a quagmire may actually debilitate the existing government. This is what she is articulating here.
Russia. It didn't end well for the Russians. There were other unintended consequences, as we know. But the fact is that a very motivated
what were the unintended consequences? Can you imagine if
leave that all unsaid?
She's just not going to say the word 9 and then afterwards 11.
Right.
I mean,
there's a little bit of blowback, and of course the destruction of the country and the Taliban taking over. That was not
the occupation after that for 20 years.
But put that aside. And why does she want to put that aside? Because she's making a very specific point. If you draw them in, maybe this becomes a quagmire that ends up destroying the country. That's the point she's trying to make here.
Funded and armed insurgency basically drove the Russians out of Afghanistan. Obviously, the similarities are not ones that you should bank on, because the terrain, the development in urban areas, et cetera, is so different. But I think that is the model that people are now looking toward. And if there can be sufficient armaments that get in, and they should be able to get in along some of the borders between other nations and Ukraine, and keep the Ukrainian, both their military and their citizen volunteer soldiers supplied, that can continue to stymie Russia. Now, let's be clear that Russia has overwhelming military force. But of course, they did in Afghanistan as well. They also brought a lot of air power to Syria. It took years to finally defeat Syria in terms of the insurgencies, the democratic forces, as well as others who battled the Russians, the Syrians, and the Iranians. So if you're fighting for your homeland, you're fighting for your family, you're fighting for your ideals, that's far more powerful than sending in these poor.
All right. Couple of things. First on, you can't bank on this, because there's a reason why they called Afghanistan the graveyard of empires.
Yep.
They don't call that in Ukraine because of all those differences about Afghanistan. But do not misunderstand what she's saying here. There is an option that she could be saying here. She could be saying, the key is, if there is enough resistance, maybe we can find an off-ramp for Putin so that we can save people's lives. And that is, she could be pushing that, but she's not. What she's saying is, maybe if we arm Ukraine enough, it will create a quagmire. Now, granted,
there are unintended consequences.
There's unintended consequences, and the Russian military has overwhelming force. But maybe this could be a protracted years-long thing where they will be stymied, and we will see a redo of what happened to the Soviet Union happen with Russia. And when she is talking about, when Emma says, you know, the kill shot is available, understand what she's saying here. The bullet are Ukrainians.
Yeah, and it's a country of 44 million people that she's kind of like toying around in her mind with as being a ground for a proxy battle, and which in her ideal world and in the people that think like her ends in Putin's power being greatly diminished.
And listen,
which is psychotic.
If I could press a button right now and Vladimir Putin was ejected into the stratosphere, I would do it without hesitation. But the bottom line is, and the reason why I read that paragraph from Atrios, is that we should be looking at de-escalation not because I have any truck for Putin, but because you want to save human lives.
Not turn them into, sign them up for 10 years of guerrilla warfare.
Exactly.
And with the end, you know, being as clean as she's anticipating that it will be, or she's claiming that it will be, even though she talked about how, you know, it didn't work out so well in Afghanistan, but it might work this time, just a little bit different.
I mean, the bottom line is just the idea that you're going to you're encouraging Ukraine to turn into a years-long insurgency for the sake, and using the example again,
right?
Using the example of Afghanistan, because aside from the unintended consequences that she sort of brushes away, the Taliban, 9/11, 20-year war, this and that, the only thing that really happened there, besides the death and destruction of many Afghans and the destruction of Afghanistan, was that it led to the demise of the Soviet Union. So what she's talking about is this is regime change without us really having to do that much. And by us, she means us sitting here in a studio, not the us of the people living in Kyiv or Kharkiv or anywhere in Ukraine.
And this is her way. I mean, like, let's be clear, too, when she goes on Maddow's show to talk about this, when she says this is something people are considering, what do you think that her designs are here? It's to pressure the Biden administration publicly to get more involved.
Without a doubt.
So just let's, I mean, that's why she's on Maddow's show.
Bad. That's my comment.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah, bad. I think bad is accurate. We should say, we had mentioned that we were going to talk about this briefly. There's no update on the drone strike in Somalia.